All right, Dalton. So the transfer portal is mercifully pretty much over now. All the craziness of this offseason is pretty much done. So we're going to go over our 5 biggest winners from the transfer portal, the 5 schools that killed it in the transfer portal, and also 5 schools that didn't do too hot and might have got a lot worse because of the transfer portal as well. So we're going to start off with the winner, start off positively here, and a school that is loading up, Dalton, for a national championship run is the Ohio State Buckeyes, because they not only they bring back basically everyone from their team last year besides like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Michael Hall Jr. and Cade Stover. They bring back everyone. They also added so many great players in the transfer portal, one of them being Quinshon Judkins, who's one of our top running backs in college football. The other one being Caleb Downs, the number 1 safety in college football. So they got the top 2 at least running back in the country, the best safety in the country, a brand new quarterback in Will Howard as well from Kansas State, who's a really, really solid quarterback. Julian Sand was a top 10 recruit in the country, technically a transfer, by the way. He counts as a transfer because he signed with Alabama and they had to transfer to Ohio State afterwards. Seth McLaughlin is the new center for Ohio State as well. He had a kind of a rough year for Alabama this past year, but the year before he was actually a really damn good center. Just got to control the snap issues that obviously plagued Alabama in that Rose Bowl game, but he should be a really good center for Ohio State this upcoming year as well. So they added like 3 starters or a few starters on that team, man, and really 2 of them, and Quinshon Judkins and Caleb Downs, are absolute freaking superstars. In fact, you can make a strong argument that they are the 2 best players in the transfer portal, and both of them ended up going to Ohio State. So Ohio State, an easy winner from the transfer portal, and why they're certainly one of the national title favorites right now, if not the national title favorite.
Absolutely. They're gunning for a title, but I'll tell you, there's a team joining the Big Ten that's gunning for them, and that's Oregon. And I'll tell you what, Ohio State might have got the 2 best players, but Oregon got the best quarterback in the transfer portal, and Dylan Gabriel, man. Going from Bo Nix to Dylan Gabriel, not much of a drop-off, if any. Gabriel tied for 3rd in the FBS in overall grade with a 91.9 last year, so it's a perfect offense for him. Heavy play action, RPO, they create space. They do everything in that offense just suits Dylan Gabriel. You can think what you want about his NFL prospects, but he's going to have elite production out there in Eugene. Joining him on that offense, Oregon we have him as the number 2 quarterback room in the country. You got Dante Moore sitting behind him that they can develop behind him for a year and really get ready for the future. And former 5-star receiver Evan Stewart, the transfer from Texas A&M, who is a spectacular route runner and an absolutely perfect fit in this offense. He and Tej Johnson might be the best receiving pair in the country this year. Stewart, as long as he's healthy and if he matures a little bit physically, his ability as a receiver in this offensive route runner, he could go off. He could just go absolutely off this year. Tej Johnson and him could both go for something like 11, 12, 1,300 yards because Gabriel's going to get him the football. They're going to be open. They have a lot of ability. But I think a quiet story is what Oregon's been doing on defense, too. Yeah. They picked up one of the best transfer defensive tackles in Derek Harmon, right, from Michigan State. But their cornerback room, right, they lost Kyrie Jackson in the draft. But you pick up Jabbar Muhammad, who's one of the best corners in the country, 78.7 coverage grade and 12 pass breakups last year. Cam Alexander from UTSA, one of the best corners in the group of 5, and I think very quietly a player is going to help them a lot. And then Brandon Johnson, a slot corner from Duke, kind of carrying the slot corner tradition at Duke that Michael Carter started. He's now in the Jets, and he's playing really, really well in the NFL. Brandon Johnson as a slot corner for them. They've remade this whole cornerback room in one offseason after losing Kyrie Jackson. I think Oregon's secondary is going to be something to watch, and it's because of what they've done in the transfer portal.
Absolutely, man. So I'm looking at it right now, Dalton. Of the last 7 Heisman Trophy winners, right? 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 7 Heisman Trophy winners. Only 2 of them weren't transfers, right? You got Jaden Daniels transferred in from Arizona State, to LSU. Caleb Williams goes to USC from Oklahoma. Bryce Young was not a transfer. Devontae Smith was not a transfer. Joe Burrow transferred to LSU from Ohio State. Kyler Murray transferred to Oklahoma from Texas A&M, and Baker Mayfield transferred to Oklahoma from Texas Tech. I think, and this has been a trend, I think we're going to have another one in Dylan Gabriel. So Oregon might have just added the Heisman Trophy winner in the transfer portal. Like that is exactly what they added, which is why they're certainly a winner. I don't know if you've locked in your Heisman pick right now, but I am very much leaning towards Dylan Gabriel, man, which I think will be a big reason why they're a big winner in the transfer portal. And you mentioned all those other guys too. Yeah, they're absolutely a big winner and a big reason why I think they're clearly a top 3 team in the country alongside Ohio State and Georgia. I'll go with another team, Dalton, that did really well in the portal and why they're a top 5 or 6 team probably now in the portal, in the country, is Ole Miss, who added, really the the bane of Lane Kiffin's existence at Ole Miss has really been the defense, right, over the last few years. Well, they did a great job in the portal of addressing that, adding guys like, say, Princely Iman-Mielon, the edge defender from Florida, adding defensive tackle Walter Nolan from Texas A&M, who was a number one recruit in the country over Travis Hunter a couple years ago as well, and has really looked good at Texas A&M. Those two right there might be first-round picks in the NFL draft. So you added maybe 2 first-round defensive linemen. You added Juice Wells as well, who was really banged up this past season, but the year before he was one of the best receivers in the country after the catch and should be amazing with Trey Harris next year as one of the best duos in the country. You added other guys like Alabama corner Trey Amos. You added Arkansas linebacker Chris Paul Jr. You added so many other starters potentially on that defense as well from the portal, from Ole Miss as well. So you got guys like Isaiah Hamilton from Houston, Brandon Turnage, the nickel corner for them, Lewis Moore, Yam Banks, the corner from South Alabama, who's probably going to play safety for them. He was a really good player at South Alabama. Key Lawrence as well. And then, you had some starters on the offensive line, like Diego Pounds at left tackle, Nate Kalepo at left guard, Julius Buelow at right guard. I mean, they added so much talent. And then the running back room we mentioned before as well, with Henry Parrish Jr., Rashad Amos, Daquan Wright at tight end, who had a really good year for Virginia Tech at tight end as well. Man, Ole Miss really loaded up in the portal, man. They are absolutely a huge winner and going to be one of the best teams in the country, largely because of what they did in the portal.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. They have a ton of depth, and they're loading up like this is the year. This is the year for Ole Miss. I think, you've got Georgia obviously coming off of a bit of a down year where they lost, one game. But, Ole Miss is really looking, especially with a 12-team playoff spot, to compete. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go to another program that expects to compete despite recent results, and that's because of the standard their head coach has said. It would not be transfer portal season without a mention of Colorado and Deion Sanders, right? And look, let's just be real. They've done another really, really good job at adding pieces in the portal. This is how they do it, right? They're throwing darts at the wall on the offensive and defensive line. They have to get better in the trenches if they're going to compete in the Big 12, right? You've got the quarterback. You've got a boatload of weapons. You've got a secondary headline by Travis Hunter and Shiloh Sanders. They just had to get better in the trenches. They've thrown a lot of darts at the wall, but 3 guys stick out to me in their transfer class, right? 2 of them actually from FAU, the alma mater, so I'm cheating a little bit, but the Wester brothers, okay? Get to know these 2 guys. LaJohntay Wester at receiver, second in the country behind Malik Washington in receptions last year, 107 catches, all right? And FAU didn't even make a bowl game. 1,164 yards and an 86 receiving grade. He's legitimately he was one of the 15 best receivers in the country last year, and one of the best slot receivers. And you've got a team that targets slot receivers more than any other team in the country, okay? Wester, I would not be shocked if he led the team in receiving walking in there. He's that good a fit. His brother, Jalen, played linebacker last year for FAU, a 94.2 run defensive grade that led all FBS linebackers, right? And Colorado had the 12th worst run defense grade in the country as a team. He's the guy they need in the middle. Just put that together. And respectable in coverage with a 68 coverage grade, but they brought him in to stop the run. Even if he just plays on early downs, he's an excellent run defender, hard hitter in the middle. And when FAU had him and Evan Anderson in the middle, run defense was like the one thing they did right, honestly. You got a team that only won 4 games, but Colorado snatched the 2 best players, and they're 2 really good players. And the last one I want to get to on the D-line is B.J. Green, man, from Arizona State. An excellent pass rusher, 83.5 pass rush grade, 56 total pressures. Straight up one of the best pass rushers in the Pac-12, even though he played at Arizona State. And this is a team that was 95th in pass rush grade. So they're adding at spots that really help their team specifically. But those 3 guys are the headline for me in Colorado.
Dude, you even mentioned your guy, Preston Hodge, the Liberty corner.
Preston Hodge, and they're loaded. That's right. And they're loaded in the secondary with Hunter and Hodge.
Yeah.
And they're like Colorado at receiver and at corner. They're so loaded that literally sometimes I forget guys. Even at receiver, you've got Jimmy Horn, LaJohntay Wester, Travis Hunter because he's everywhere.
Will Shepherd.
Will Shepherd. Like at receiver and at corner and in the secondary, Colorado can play with anybody at the skill spots. Anybody. They just need to find the trenches. Like if Wester is big time in run defense for them and BJ Green in the pass rush, like their front 7, and we've talked about it, the Big 12 is loaded with running games. This is going to be the biggest problem for Colorado is that they need to stop the run against a million teams in the Big 12 that can run the ball.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, Will Shepard transferred in from Vanderbilt. He had over, I think, 600 yards for Vanderbilt this past year. Dallin Hayden, the Ohio State running back, transferred in as well. He's going to be their starting running back probably. 6 new offensive linemen as well. Yeah, they did a great job in the portal. Our last winner we're going to get to, Dalton, is the Miami Hurricanes, right? Who we were talking about in one of our past episodes, our running back unit episode, that Miami might be our pick to win the ACC next year. We haven't decided on that just yet. But a big reason for that is what they did in the portal. So they added Cam Ward, right, is the headliner, brand new quarterback for them. Super high ceiling, right? He's got a little bit of a low floor right now, which is why we're at least a little bit lower than other people on him. But he's still got a super high ceiling and still a good enough quarterback to compete in the ACC with the best of the best. Damian Martinez, one of the top 10 running backs in the country, in my opinion, as well. He's really productive at Oregon State over the last couple of years. Tyler Barron transferred in just recently from Tennessee, the other edge at Tennessee. He was super productive at Tennessee. And then also, not only him, they got Elijah Alston, also an edge defender, who's one of the highest graded edge defenders in the country this past year at Marshall. He was going to be a backup for Miami this year because you got Ruben Bain, you got Tyler Barron, and you got Elijah Alston as kind of a rotational guy. That's elite, man. And they got Simeon Barrow, the D tackle from Michigan State there as well. CJ Clark transferred there as well. You got a new center in Zach Carpenter. Samuel Brown at receiver they got transferring in. They got some other guys that transferred in. They're probably going to start for them, like Isaiah Taylor at safety, Michelle Powell, at nickel corner. Miami killed it this year, man. And I think it's a big reason why I think the Hurricanes are one of the top teams in the ACC is because they have so many loaded. They really loaded up at a lot of areas, and they added some really talented and potential superstars to that team through the portal.
Yeah, there's a big saga, earlier in the offseason about where Cam Ward is going, and he picked Miami, and that's the headline. But I'm going to tell you something. This defensive line is nasty. And all those guys you just mentioned, Alston was second behind Leatu Latu in overall grade last year. And I'm going to throw one more name at you that's fun. Marley Cook, an interior player from Middle Tennessee. A little bit of a down year last year. 2 years ago, Middle Tennessee had a 90 pass rush grade. Like, they're absolutely loaded with guys on the defensive line. To me, that's actually the scariest part of their team. If that D-line, if all those guys play up to what they've been playing, like Tyler Barron was one of the best pass rushers in the SEC last year.
Yeah.
Straight up. And I know he's been to 9 schools in the past 3 months, but he's still a really good player. Simeon Barrow had a lot of good reps at Michigan State. Elijah Alston's a monster. Ruben Bain's a monster. This defensive line is, to me, the more I look at this, the number one reason Miami could succeed this year. It's more than Cam and Damian Martinez and even Xavier Restrepo's great. That to me is like a fearsome unit. And you talk about starters and backups and things like that, but that's the type of defensive line where that's so deep that you start rotating packages and you could get 4 pass rushers out there on late downs and things like that. Miami's got a lot to look forward to with this portal class, especially.
I think they have the best edge room in the country. I said it before. You got Ruben Bain Jr., who was unbelievable as a true freshman last year. You got Tyler Barron transferring in. You mentioned Elijah Alston as well. I think that edge room, man, is the best in the country. So Miami did a great job in the portal, but not everyone did a great job in the portal, Dolan. Who are some of the losers in the transfer portal this offseason?
Well, it's kind of the antithesis of Miami will stay in the ACC for a minute, and it's not even the work they did in the portal because they did no work in the portal, and that's Clemson. Look, they didn't lose a ton. I think it was only 6 or 7 guys total. You lost Andrew.
Look at that portal additions right there, Dalton. You see that?
You lost in the secondary. It's not false. This is just the way Dabo still wants to do it his way, right? And look, if it works and we're all wrong, cool. But recruiting now is a 2-headed monster between high school and the portal. And if you're not going to use one of them, especially the one with more experienced players, and look, there are some that'll argue that teams like Colorado or Miami this year, or whatever, using the portal too much and not recruiting well. But you can't just not do one or the other. And I think it's going to be tough for Clemson. You look at them and you go, some of the guys that graduated, like a Will Shipley and something like that, guys like that. But how are they getting better? Because Clemson had a down year last year, right? And they were talking about what's Dabo Swinney's status and Tyler from Spartanburg. And I think they started 4-4, if I remember right. And then they kind of got hot as the year went on. So maybe they have hope with the way they played down the stretch, especially. They're always going to play good defense, no question. But at what point do they start adding with other resources? Just adding nobody look, I don't know if it's a stubborn thing. I don't know if guys, transfer kids, don't want to go to Clemson. I'd have a hard time believing that. That's a national championship winning program, like very recently. But you can't just keep letting more talented kids walk out the door than come in. Like at some point, like Clemson, when I think about who's going to compete in the ACC this year, my mind immediately goes to Clemson, right? Like they have talent, they have great defense, they have all this stuff. But then you kind of look at like what teams do in the portal, like Florida State lost a boatload of talent, but they bring a boatload in because they can find experienced talent in the portal. If you don't do this, you just have to wonder if you get left behind.
I think they're getting left behind. I think they are. I think Dabo's starting to get left behind. I think he's the old man yelling at clouds right now, basically, is what Dabo Swinney is, man. It's just like, man, this is the way it is. I'm sorry. It's the way it is. And I understand that you love the old college football that you won 2 national championships, and that's why Nick Saban left college football too. Nick Saban, a big reason why he left, because he hated where college football was going.
Isn't this what happened to Jimbo Fisher too at A&M, where he just didn't use it enough?
I think a little bit of that, yeah. I think the development wasn't good enough either. Like they brought in super highly rated recruits, it's just they didn't develop them at all. I think that was a big problem too. But yeah, it's just like, man, imagine, like I keep saying this, but it's like, imagine if an NFL team was like, okay, we're gonna draft and we're not going to sign free agents. We're just going to draft.
So it's what the Green Bay Packers used to do.
Yeah, it's like, dude, you can't do that, man. You can't be relying on 18 or 19-year-old high school kids to come in and immediately fill in these massive holes left on your roster.
Yeah, what you're saying is literally why Brett Favre had 1 Super Bowl trophy and Aaron Rodgers has 1 Super Bowl trophy.
Yeah, it's like, oh, well, we trust our scouts. It's like, okay, sometimes you mess up. You screw up, and it's like, that's fine. You can mess up in the draft, but you got to fill those holes through the portal, and they're not doing that, man. They were not only they're struggling in the portal, they're not struggling. In fact, I think if Clemson really tried, they'd be one of the top teams in the portal. Because you look at like, a guy like Keon Coleman, for example, would look at Clemson and be like, oh, look, I can definitely go there. Like Clemson, they won a couple national titles. They used to be wide receiver. They would get top transfers. They have the money too. It's not like a money issue. They have the money. They can get the top guys if they want to. They're not doing it though. They refuse to do it. And I think that's a big problem with Clemson right now. And until they start doing that, I just don't see them returning to. Listen, they're recruiting well enough, and Dabo's a good enough coach, and they got good enough coaches. They'll always be like a top 15 team in the country. But until they get with the times, with NIL and with the portal, they will not be a top 5 consistent program like they used to be in the past. I think that's a big issue. And not only did they not bring anyone in, Dalton, they lost Andrew Makuba to Texas, who's a really good player. They lost Toriana Pride, who was probably going to be one of the starting corners for them this year. He went to Missouri. Bo Collins, one of their probably starting receivers, went to Notre Dame as well. They lost some serious talent to the draft and the portal, and they brought nothing in besides recruits too. So Clemson's definitely a big loser. I'm going to go with my favorite school, Dalton, as another loser in the portal, unfortunately, and that is the Penn State Nittany Lions. Now, I will say this. Penn State added some really good players, some other really good players in the portal, in A.J. Harris, the Georgia corner, who's a former top 35 recruit in the country only a couple years ago, as a true sophomore now. Very excited about him as a new corner at Penn State. Nolan Rucci, the Wisconsin tackle, should be one of the starting tackles. He was a former 5-star recruit a few years ago too. So excited about that. Here's the issue with Penn State, though, right? You see right there, they lost Keandre Lambert-Smith, and we actually didn't even put on the list, but they lost Dante Cephas, too, as the number 2 receiver for Penn State. They lost their number 1 receiver and their number 2 receiver. King Mack, also a pretty good safety, went to Alabama. But they lost Lambert-Smith and Dante Cephas, their top 2 receivers from last year. The biggest issue of this team was that the receiving core sucked. The receiving core is bad. And you lose your top 2 receivers, and you bring in Julian Fleming, former 5-star recruit too, and even I, Dalton, as the number 1 5-star recruit lover, even I will say, you can't just look at that for Julian Fleming. It's been 4 years for Julian Fleming, and he hasn't made good on that 5-star promise just yet. Now, of course, he was in a loaded room at Ohio State, and he might have got lost in the shuffle there, so we'll see what he can do now. But even though, man, it's been 4 years, and he's done basically nothing for Ohio State as a program. Penn State lost their top 2 receivers, and they brought in Julian Fleming, and that's basically their answer. And they go, "Oh, roll with what we had last year." Man, this is the biggest issue of this offense last year, and I think it's an even bigger issue this year. And now all of a sudden, you're relying exclusively on Andy Kolodnicki to come in and save this offense now, instead of having him come in and having talented players to work with. Now it's like, no, buddy, you better elevate what we have right now. And the offensive line, I'm worried about too. I'm just, man, the big thing though, the receiving core. They lost their top 2 guys from already a bad receiving core, and they did basically nothing besides Julian Fleming to replace it, man. I am pretty pessimistic about this Penn State offense next year, Dalton. I don't know.
Your one bit of hope is Kotelnicki, right? Because Kansas, when he was there last year, they didn't have a receiver that we would think of as like, oh, super NFL talent or anything, but they were third in the country in receiving grade. They made it happen after the catch. They made it happen downfield. So I think that would be the one, kind of beacon of light there to hope on is Andy Kotelnicki. But no, I get it totally. And I'll tell you, I have another team with very similar concerns. And to me, that's Alabama. Look, I think Kalen DeBoer has done a really nice job of bringing in certain pieces, right, and holding on to Jalen Milroe, right? That's the centerpiece.
That's huge.
Like Milroe's a great fit for his offense, and he got Parker Brailsford to come in with him from Washington, who we think is the best center in the country. But the problem is, and you see it on the screen there, losing all these receivers, losing all these weapons that Milroe can throw to. For as much as Milroe has the talent to win Heisman, right now you lose Isaiah Bond, you lose Ja'Cory Brooks, you lose Amari Niblack, you lose Roydell Williams, you lose a depth guy like Malik Benson or Shaz Preston. Like, they're left right now with their top three in the receiving corps being Kobe Prentice, Kendrick Law, and Jeremy Bernard, who came in from Washington. Those three guys combined for less than 900 yards last year. And I really, with Niblack gone, it's hard to figure out what they have at tight end too. Like, they bring in Josh Cuevas, but he had less than 200 yards last year at Washington also. So there is like Jalen Milroe and a good offensive line and a boatload of unproven for the weaponry. Like, I would be a little worried about who Milroe's throwing to. And the problem is too, at least last year, he's not like a high percentage passer, right? He's a high variance passer. He's chucking the ball downfield looking for big time throws. Well, you're going to make big-time throws. You need guys who can get open downfield. I'm not sure Alabama has a whole lot of that. And that's not to even mention that they lost two big pieces in the secondary in Caleb Downs and Trey Amos, who were big-time players for them, especially Downs, obviously maybe the best safety in the country. But I'm very, very worried about Alabama's receiving core in the same way that you are with Penn State.
Yeah, I feel a little bit better about Alabama because they got Kalen DeBoer drawing up plays for them, and I just don't know if I trust Penn State to – for Franklin not to just give Kotelnicki a playbook. That's the one thing I've worried me about Kotelnicki is that it seems like the offense has kind of stayed the same, even with brand new offensive coordinators at Penn State all the time. And I'm just worried that it's kind of just a playbook they run and not,
The one thing is it's hard, and maybe that comes from the spring game, and this is something that actually Christian Hackenberg told me, is that like the spring game, it's hard to look at because he didn't use like any of his actual stuff.
Yeah.
He used like only day one stuff. Like last year, Kansas's offense led the nation in motion. They ran more motion than anybody. Like Kotelnicki's not going to show all of the complicated stuff in a spring game. He's not going to do it because he's so good at scheming guys open, one, and creating space in the running game, two. It's just we're not going to know until that very first game against West Virginia. We're not going to know anything about Penn State's offense, but I'm with you. It sure looks like a lack of at least talent at the receiver position. But Kotelnicki, if Franklin gives him the reins, I think he can make some things happen, but he's got to give it to him.
He better give him the reins. That was what I was saying. Is that it seems like past OCs that have come in before, it looks very similar, and it's like I wonder if Franklin's just giving them a playbook and saying run this playbook. You can't do that. Like, you got to be able to say, hey, listen, I'll let you run the offense. And I'm hoping Kotelnicki has that opportunity. I hate keeping going back to Penn State here, but that is how passionately I feel about this Penn State offense as of right now. We'll go to the other side, Dalton, from Alabama, obviously bringing in Kalen DeBoer. Obviously, DeBoer left Washington. Washington lost a lot in the portal because of that, too. So they lost, obviously, a ton to the NFL draft. But also in the portal, Parker Brailsford, the best center in the country, goes to Alabama. Jabbar Muhammad, a top 10 corner in the country, goes to Oregon. Jeremy Bernard, one of their top receivers, or was going to be at least one of the top receivers this upcoming year, goes to Alabama. Nate Kalepo leaves. Austin Mack leaves. Javion Green leaves. Asa Turner is gone as well, the safety for them. They lost a lot of talent, man. They did bring in some guys like Will Rogers at quarterback, who's shown to be okay so far in his career, and he's had some really good moments in the past. Jonah Coleman is an excellent running back they brought in as well. But I think it's going to be a little bit of a rough going for Jedd Fisch as he begins his Washington tenure, especially in the Big Ten as well. They went from a team that made it all the way to the national championship game last year. I think they're a 7-5 or 8-4 team this year, honestly, man, which is kind of crazy for a team that made it all the way to the national title game just the year before. So I have faith in Jedd Fisch, and he's done a great job at Arizona. I have faith that he'll do a good job at Washington, but I think this upcoming year in 2024, won't be as good as Washington's been used to over the last couple of years.
I completely agree with that. And I think, look, Jed Fish did an incredible job at Arizona. I'm actually more worried probably about Washington's defense than their offense. He will find a way on offense, but losing Muhammad, losing Asa Turner, losing Michelle, like their secondary, at least from what I can see, is in shambles right now. That would be a big concern for me. And honestly, we could pick almost any team, and this was kind of the hard part of picking this side of it. We could pick almost any team that has a new coach. That be like, okay, they lost a bunch of guys in the portal, and the new coach has to come in and rebuild it. But one I wanted to highlight, though, was Duke. I just think with Mike Elko leaving for A&M and really bringing them the best stretch of football they've played in a long time, it's tough right now for them. Manny Diaz going in there and taking over, but you lose Riley Leonard, you lose Aeneas Peebles, one of the best D tackles in the country. They're starting running back Jordan Waters. Slot corner, Brandon Johnson. R.J. Oben was a starting edge. Mekhi Wall. You lose Dorian Mousey, who was a starting linebacker. Like, I feel for them. They bring in Malik Murphy from Texas, who played a couple games last year at Texas to play quarterback, or at least compete for the starting job. But Duke, I feel for them. I feel for those fans because they've just lost so much talent. And Manny Diaz, that is not going to be an easy rebuild with just the core that they had together last year. And if Riley Leonard didn't get hurt at the end of the game against Notre Dame, you wonder where that whole thing could have gone as far as ACC contention, because they were competing even with Florida State until Leonard left that game with re-aggravating his ankle as well. So, and then he was done for the year. So the quarterback situation fell apart, but this was a really, really good team that now has lost a boatload of talent. It's kind of one, and there's certain other ones too. We think about like Oregon State's another one that's getting a new coach, or like different teams that the coach left and lost a lot of talent. But Duke really stood out to me just for the amount of talent. That was a really good football team last year, and it's going to be really hard for them to compete with all those guys gone now.
Yeah, Duke certainly lost a lot in the portal, and it's going to be a rough go for new coach Manny Diaz. Like I said, to rebuild it right now. But that's what we got for our 5 biggest winners and our 5 biggest losers from this year's transfer portal cycle. Make sure you guys comment below what you think the biggest winners and losers were in this transfer portal cycle, and be on the lookout for more college football videos coming out every single week as we continue to preview the 2024 college football season.